I understood my place in the family the night my father raised his glass at dinner and said, "Congratulations. This is yours, son," before placing car keys into my brother's hand. The room erupted in applause. Then he turned to me, his voice quieter, and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "Rent's due Sunday." Years of subtle favoritism suddenly made sense. I smiled because that's what I'd always done, swallowed the sting, and stayed quiet. But something inside me checked out. What followed didn't happen in front of everyone. It came later, and it pulled my family apart piece by piece. Before I continue, tap like, let me know where you're listening from, and share your thoughts. I'd really value them. I'm Sarah. On paper, I'm the kind of child parents brag about. I work in social services, sitting with people on their hardest days, helping them find stability when their lives feel like they're falling apart. I learned how to stay composed, how to listen without reacting, how to carry emotional weight calmly. Ironically, those skills were shaped at home. From the outside, my family looked picture perfect: trimmed lawn, coordinated photo frames, punctual Sunday dinners. My dad built his business through grit and long hours, earning respect the hard way. My mom taught young children and believed harmony was best maintained by avoiding conflict altogether. And then there was my younger brother, easygoing, magnetic, the kind of person people instinctively give grace to. We grew up under the same roof, but the expectations weren't the same. When he struggled, the family rallied. When I succeeded, it was treated as standard, nothing worth pausing for. No one ever said, "We expect more from you," but it was understood. It showed up in the way my achievements were skimmed over while his setbacks sparked discussion. My decisions were scrutinized, his were encouraged. I became the dependable one, the fixer, the backup plan, the person who carried responsibility without being asked. After college, I moved back home with a clear plan: save money, gain experience, apply to graduate school. I contributed where I could: groceries, repairs, bills, never keeping track. It was meant to be temporary, practical, a stepping stone. My mom often said, "Your dad just trusts you," as if trust explained why support only flowed one way. As if being capable meant you didn't need care. I convinced myself it didn't hurt. Families are complicated, I told myself. Love looks different for everyone. I believed that if I stayed steady long enough, things would balance out. That one day, my dad would look at me and see more than just the reliable daughter. That hope followed me into the summer of my brother's graduation. Even then, I sensed a shift, something tightening beneath the surface. Looking back, that's what hurts most. I walked into that dinner believing I still belonged. The weeks before graduation felt strange. The house buzzed with planning, but I was kept at arm's length. My mom obsessed over menus and guest lists. My dad spent more time in the garage, the door closed, conversations lowering whenever I passed by. When I asked simple questions, arrival times, seating, I got brushed off. "We've handled it." I told myself I was reading too much into it. Graduation day arrived bright and sweltering. I cleaned, set the table, arranged flowers my mom insisted were essential. My brother paced in his cap and gown, nervous and excited. Without thinking, I adjusted his collar, the same way I always had before his big moments. At the ceremony, my dad clapped harder than anyone. He half stood when my brother's name was called, pride written across his face. I applauded too, genuinely happy for him, even as that familiar ache settled in. I remembered my own graduations, my dad present, but distracted, already scrolling on his phone by the time my name echoed through the room. Back at the house, guests poured in. Laughter filled every corner. Music played. I moved between rooms, refilling drinks, answering questions, smiling through congratulations meant for my brother. The garage stayed closed the entire time, guarding something I couldn't yet see. At dinner, my dad stood and raised his glass. He talked about perseverance, about pushing through hardship, about how effort deserves reward. His words leaned unmistakably toward my brother, his hand resting on his shoulder. Then he revealed the keys. They glinted under the light, solid, unmistakable. A brand new car. Worth more than I had ever spent on myself in one moment. The room exploded with cheers. My brother froze, then laughed in disbelief. I clapped. I smiled. My body knew the routine. When the crowd moved toward the garage to admire the car, my dad met my eyes and gestured toward the hallway. Just a quick word. In the quiet kitchen, his voice shifted, calm, businesslike. You've been here long enough, he said. It's time you start paying rent. $900. Due Sunday. For a second, I thought he had to be joking. The timing felt unreal. I looked past him toward the garage, where my brother sat grinning behind the wheel of a brand new car. And suddenly, everything made sense. Not anger. Not even heartbreak. Just clarity. This wasn't confusion or poor communication. It was a boundary being set, and I finally saw that I'd been standing on the losing side of it my whole life. The rest of the evening drifted past me like background noise. Laughter spilled from the garage as people circled the car, admiring it from every angle. Another bottle was opened. My brother kept repeating, "I still can't believe it," as if saying it enough times would lock the moment in place. I hovered near the sink, washing dishes that were already clean, responding automatically when someone spoke to me, waiting for the tightness in my chest to loosen. It never did. Once the house emptied and the driveway lights went dark, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. $900. Due Sunday. The number stuck with me, not because it was unaffordable, but because of what it symbolized. This wasn't about rent. It was a judgment. I replayed every time I'd stepped in without being asked, covering groceries, repairs, surprise expenses that landed in my lap because I was good with things like that. None of that counted. Rent, apparently, was reserved for moments meant to remind me where I stood. Sleep never came. After midnight, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. Years of careful saving stared back at me. Enough to leave. Enough to breathe freely. Enough to stop bargaining for respect through quiet sacrifices. Morning arrived loud and cheerful. My dad and brother talked excitedly about taking the car out. My mom floated around, forcing brightness into her voice the way she did when she wanted everything to seem fine. No one mentioned the night before. That silence said more than words ever could. I waited until they left. The quiet afterward felt heavy, but honest. I started packing slowly, methodically. Folding clothes. Making clean decisions about what to keep and what to abandon. I left behind things tied to older versions of myself, the one who believed endurance would eventually earn appreciation. At my desk, I paused over a blank sheet of paper. I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I wrote only what was necessary. I'm moving out. I'm taking full responsibility for my life. Please don't contact me until I reach out. I folded the note once and placed it on the fridge beneath an old magnet. Then I carried my bags to the car and drove away without looking back. The reaction wasn't immediate. First came silence. Then a text from my brother asking if this was some kind of prank. Then missed calls from my mom. By the time I reached the highway, my phone kept buzzing on the passenger seat. I didn't answer, not out of spite, and not out of anger, but because for the first time, I chose not to explain myself to people who had already assigned my value. That decision changed everything. I didn't go far that night. I drove until the streetlights blurred, then parked in a grocery store lot that stayed open late. I sat gripping the steering wheel, breathing shallowly, trying to understand how one sentence could empty years of effort all at once. 900 by Sunday. The words looped in my head, tangled with the image of my brother smiling in the garage, hands locked on the steering wheel like it might disappear. I wasn't angry yet. Anger would have been simpler. What I felt was colder, a realization settling piece by piece. My phone lit up again. My brother. "Are you okay?" he wrote. Mom's panicking. Dad says you took it too far. I stared at the screen, then locked the phone and placed it face down. I didn't owe anyone an instant explanation. Not tonight. I stayed with my best friend that first week. She didn't interrogate me. She handed me a spare key, cleared out a drawer, and said, "Stay as long as you want." The ease of it nearly broke me. No conditions. No expectations. Just room to exist. My mom's messages followed, long voicemails swinging between concern and blame. She wanted to fix things. She wanted me home so we could be a family again. She never mentioned the rent or the timing, as if avoiding it could erase the moment entirely. My dad stayed silent longer. When he finally called, his voice was controlled and clipped. "This was unnecessary," he said. "Adults don't walk out." I almost laughed. I hadn't stormed out. I packed calmly. I left a note. It was the most measured decision I'd ever made. A few days later, my brother actually called. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice sounded unsure, stripped of its usual confidence. We met at a coffee shop between my friend's place and the house. Neutral territory. He arrived early, phone in hand, tapping his foot. "I didn't know," he said right away. "About the rent. Dad never told me." "I know," I replied. And I did. This wasn't his fault. He ran a hand over his face. "Things are bad at home. Mom keeps crying. Dad's angry all the time. And now they're asking me to handle stuff you used to do, bills, appointments, paperwork. I don't even know where to start." I watched the realization hit him. For the first time, the safety net was gone. "I'm not vanishing," I said gently. "I'm just done carrying everything." He nodded slowly, unsettled but understanding. That conversation stayed with me because it marked the real shift. I didn't need a dramatic showdown. The structure was collapsing on its own. The real confrontation came later, not at dinner, not in the garage, but on a quiet afternoon when my dad showed up unannounced at my friend's apartment. I opened the door to find him standing there, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw tight. He scanned the small space like it offended him. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. We sat facing each other, the air thick with everything left unsaid. He didn't hesitate. "You embarrassed us," he said. "You made a spectacle." "I left without drama," I said evenly. "That's hardly causing a scene." "You didn't give us any warning." I met his eyes. "You handed me a rent notice during my brother's celebration. That was the warning shot." He dismissed it with a flick of his hand. "That's how life works. You're grown. Grown people pay their share." "And yet," I replied, "you rewarded him with a car that costs more than anything I've ever allowed myself." "That's not the same thing." I stayed quiet, letting the pause stretch. He filled it. "You've always managed just fine on your own," my dad said. The old refrain. Familiar. Comfortable, for him. "So being capable means I deserve less?" I asked. He exhaled sharply, annoyed. "You're twisting it. You're comparing things that don't match." "No," I said calmly. "I'm comparing effort to outcome. Responsibility to support. And I want to know why those only ever move in one direction." He hesitated, just barely. Then he said it. "Because he matters more." There was no apology. No softening. Just the truth, dropped cleanly between us. And instead of hurting, it cleared something inside me. The question I'd carried my whole life finally had an answer. I stood. "I'm not here to fight," I said. I just needed to hear that out loud. "Hear what?" he snapped. "That I was never going to earn equal footing," I replied. "Not by being dependable. Not by being patient. Not by staying." His brow furrowed. You're misreading this. No, I said. I'm finally seeing it clearly. I walked him to the door. He looked unsettled, like he'd expected tears or anger, something he could manage. You're really doing this? He asked. Walking away over money? I shook my head. I walked away because I finally understood. After that, the pressure increased. My mom called in tears. My brother sent frantic messages, panicked about things unraveling. Then my dad started calling relentlessly, from every number he could reach me on. I let it ring. Not to punish anyone, but because answering would have pulled me back into a role I was done playing. Over the next few weeks, I watched the ripple effects from a distance. My brother struggled under expectations he'd never had to face before. My mom grew quieter, more cautious, forced to sit with the discomfort she'd always smoothed over. And my dad, who once dictated the rhythm of our family, lost control of it entirely. He didn't know how to fix things without issuing orders. Meanwhile, my own life steadied. I moved into a place of my own. I poured energy into my work, and it showed. My supervisor noticed. I was trusted, valued, not as someone's daughter, but as myself. One evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my dad. I didn't mean it the way it came out. I read it several times before replying. Intent doesn't erase impact. He never answered. That's when I knew the conflict was finished, not because there was an apology, not because everything healed, but because I no longer needed his understanding to move forward. The balance of power had shifted quietly and permanently. Our family would never function the same way again. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It came gradually, in uneven waves, like a house settling after a hidden fault line gives way. My brother struggled first. Without me managing deadlines, smoothing conversations, absorbing pressure, he floundered. He called more than once, admitting he felt overwhelmed. Not angry. Not entitled. Just unsure. For the first time, he was standing where I always had, expected to cope without applause. I helped when appropriate, but I didn't reclaim my old role. That space stayed empty by choice. My mom changed slowly. The frantic voicemails stopped. Shorter messages replaced them. Apologies appeared between updates. She didn't name the favoritism directly, but she stopped pretending everything was fine. When we met weeks later, she looked worn in a quieter, more honest way. My absence had forced her to face what she'd spent years avoiding. My dad adjusted last. Losing control didn't soften him immediately, it diminished him. Without my reliability to lean on, his authority stopped working. When he reached out, his words were cautious, restrained, like someone learning how to speak without commands. As for me, life grew lighter. My work energized me instead of draining me. I paid my bills on my own terms, in a space that belonged to me. No one praised my endurance anymore, they respected my limits. I didn't receive a sweeping apology or a tidy resolution. What I gained was quieter, and far more permanent. I got myself back. I didn't return to being the daughter who held everything together at her own expense. But I didn't cut my family off completely either. I chose something harder and more deliberate. I chose distance, with intention. Over time, the rules shifted. Conversations slowed. Expectations softened. Ultimatums stopped being issued because they stopped working. My mom learned that peace built on silence eventually collapses. My brother grew into responsibility, not because he was pushed, but because no one was left to carry it for him. And I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to people who never planned to protect me in return. I built a life that didn't require permission, one that felt stable, honest, and entirely my own. That dinner wasn't the moment my family fell apart. It was the moment the illusion did. Sometimes walking away isn't about punishment. It's about refusing to keep shrinking so others can stay comfortable. If this story resonated with you, know this: wanting fairness doesn't make you weak, and choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. If you've ever had to step back from family to protect who you are, share your story. Someone else may need to hear it. And if you want more real stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss what's next.